I take no pleasure in posting a negative review. I am not interested in hurting a company or stirring things up just for clicks or views. That is not what this channel is about. Out of respect, I also want you to know there are no surprises here. I told Closer Acoustics directly that I had concerns about this system and that I would be bringing them up in this video. And to their credit, they understand. I really do respect and appreciate that they were open to receive criticism. So, I'm going to ask you as my audience to keep that in mind as we work through this review, and with a warm welcome back to New Record Day. Welcome back to New Record Day. My name is Ron, and if you consider yourself an audiophile or a music enthusiast, welcome home. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell notification so you know when the next video drops. Now, before we dive in, Closer Acoustics provided the BLOCKS speaker system for review. They aren't paying me, they don't get to preview this video, and they haven't had any input on my thoughts. In other words, what you're about to hear is 100% my honest opinion, some of it backed up with some evidence, and that's that. BLOCKS is an open baffle modular loudspeaker system hand-built in Poland. Instead of a single fixed cabinet, BLOCKS lets you build your system using different modules or blocks depending on your needs. The core wideband module is called the OKHO, which uses a 12-inch EMS full-range driver. And of course, the OKHO can be paired with the Bob Mark II bass modules, each using a 12-inch EMS woofer and an open baffle U frame. Now, depending on listening positions or how high or how low you want to be listening, you can adjust height or create a clean look using a blank block, which is basically a driverless enclosure. And last, for vibration control, you can add the platform bass, which ships with ISO Acoustics Gaia 2 feet. Simply put, the idea is flexibility. You can run a basic stack with a blank, a bob, and an OKHO on top, or you can double up on bass modules for more foundation. As for pricing, a basic setup starts north of $7,000, and a fully built out system with 2 bobs per side and a blank will run you north of $11,000, and that is the type of system that I'm going to be reviewing today. As for published specifications, the OKHO module has a sensitivity of about 91 dB, an 8 ohm nominal impedance, and a power handling up to 40 watts. The Bob Mark II bass modules are rated a little higher at 94 dB sensitivity and 8 ohms nominal and 100 watts of power handling each. Now, that's great and all, but the second that you wire these up and combine modules, that impedance begins to drop. As an example, a single OKHO plus 1 bob comes in around 4 ohms. And 2 bobs plus an OKHO can dip down to 2.7 ohms, with the lowest point measured at 2.2 ohms around 85 hertz. So folks, at first glance, the BLOCKS system checks all the right boxes for a boutique artisanal product, hand-built cabinets, high-purity copper wiring, and the flexibility to configure them to taste. I mean, what's not to like? Well, once I got them in the SoundShed and started looking closer and, of course, listening, there were a few things about the build quality and performance that raised some eyebrows. Firing up my Audiophile playlist on Qobuz, the first thing that struck me was a pleasant texture and tone in the heart of mid-range. If we're talking only about the mid-band, let's say from 200 hertz up to about 1K, the BLOCKS did offer up a nice tone that could be described as natural or organic sounding. Most vocals and acoustic instruments had a presence and an immediacy that wideband drivers are known for, and for sure, it all sounded cohesive, which, coming from one point source driver, was one of the things that I liked about this system. But alas, then comes the not so great news. Running the blocks in an MTN configuration like you see here, or even stacked with an Oco on top of two Bobs, I expected deep bass with real authority, especially given the size of these speakers. I mean, look at them, they are huge. They take up a massive amount of real estate. Kick drums, bass guitars, or anything else below the belt should have hit me right where it counts. Instead, most deep bass wasn't even there. And what bass was there, it barely tickled me with a feather as opposed to knocking me out with a sledgehammer. And I gotta say, I was really disappointed. Later, when I checked my in-room measurements, it lined up. Sure, there's usable energy from about 50 to 60 hertz on up, but below that, the response falls off quickly. That explains why those lowest registers never really came alive. Now, more bad news. On the other end of the spectrum, I also struggled with treble extension. Cymbals, chimes, the sparkle on top, it all sounds muted or not there at all. Again, my in-room measurement confirmed what I was hearing, or in this case, not hearing, which was a sharp roll-off past 10 kilohertz. So look, the mid-range does sound cohesive, and I do indeed like the texture and tone, but both bass and top-end extension is missing, leaving the overall balance kind of a mess. Now, some of you might be thinking, Ron, this isn't fair. You gave Zoo Audio a free pass with the methods, and they did not measure well. And you know what? That's fair. But here's the difference. First, the price. The blocks start at $7,000, and this system here is closer to $12,000, which is a very different conversation. Second, with the methods, my goal was to show that there are times when creative positioning, even laying them on their side and listening about 30 degrees off axis, can unlock a lot more performance. But again, with the blocks, no matter what I tried, I felt like I was missing too much of the sonic picture. And folks, that's just the sound. When I took the time to pull the back plates and got a closer look inside, there were design choices that raised even more concerns that I just can't phone in or totally ignore. First, taking a look at this picture, this is the Oak Hose crossover. This, folks, is as simple as it gets. A single capacitor and a resistor, making it, of course, a first-order filter. And look, there is nothing wrong with keeping things minimal when the driver allows it. But in this case, that resistor appears to be sitting in the signal path, basically in an L-pad configuration, which means every bit of current headed to that wideband driver is flowing through it. And here's the thing. It's a path audio resistor rated at 10 watts. And with impedance dipping as low as 2 ohms in certain configurations, what do you think happens when your amp is trying to pump blood through a little 10-watt resistor? Yeah. Now look, I'm not saying these are going to catch fire, but I do have to bring this up because if a part like this overheats, the risk is real, and I am not willing to gloss over that on my channel. Now, the second thing has to do with the cabinet themselves. Closer Acoustics makes a point about the artisanal craftsmanship, and in many ways, that shows. But the enclosures are joined with simple butt joints, and you can actually see glue seeping through some of the seams. So again, at this price point, I expect more, and I doubt that I'm the only one. This is the kind of detail that might not affect sound, but it absolutely affects how the product feels in terms of value. All right, let's get some mics on the block system and run through our typical sound clips. For this round, I think I'm going to skip comparing these to other speakers, but instead simply compare the reference track to the recorded speaker. So for clip A, you will hear the reference, and clip B, you will hear the block system. All right, headphones on, let's go.
Engineer, where are you headed? Engineer, where are you headed?
No hubiera pensado que yo me iba a enamorar, jamás no quería saber nada más, nunca más. No hubiera pensado que yo me iba a enamorar, jamás no quería saber nada más, nunca más.
So, what did you hear in the clips? I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts, so don't forget to post them down below in the comments section. On to the measurements. On-axis response, this is gated. The Oakho wideband module shows a choppy frequency response with dips around 550 Hz and 1 kHz, followed by jagged behavior in the top end. Instead of a smooth extension, the treble rolls off unevenly and doesn't reach very far. This is exactly what I heard in listening. Again, not a lot of shimmer or air. Horizontal dispersion. Wideband drivers naturally narrow at the top, but here it happens way too quickly. This is where a smaller wideband driver has the advantage because with the Oakho, by 15 to 20 degrees, you're already losing balance. And by 30 degrees, the treble is full of cancellations. In other words, these speakers must be pointed right at you and have a very narrow sweet spot. As for the vertical response, things collapse even faster. If you care about an even room response or your ears aren't locked in right on axis, the overall balance of this system takes a massive hit. So that covers all of the gated response. What about in-room response, which I mentioned earlier in the review? Well, taking a look at the MTM configuration like you can see right here, bass drops rapidly below 50 Hz and treble energy rolls off steeply past 10 kHz. That lines up exactly with what I described earlier. Mid-range presence is there, but the foundation and sparkle, it's on vacation. Last, the impedance plot shows us when you run 3 8-ohm speakers in parallel, that's the kind of load that will punish an amplifier if it isn't truly stable into 2 ohms. Well, folks, there you have it. Where does that leave us with the Closer Acoustics blocks? On the positive side, the texture, tone, and cohesive sound in the heart of mid-range is undeniable. And the modular approach is ambitious and it is different. There's definitely a kind of charm here that some folks might fall in love with. But at this price point, the shortcomings are hard, if not impossible, for me to ignore. Bass doesn't dig deep. Treble rolls off way too early, the sweet spot is razor thin, and the impedance curve is brutal. Add in the cabinet details and the crossover choices I showed earlier. For a system that starts around $7,000 and goes well into 5 figures, I'm sorry, I just don't see the value. At the end of the day, the blocks are bold, unique, and artisanal, but they're not a speaker I can recommend without a long list of concerns. If you know exactly what they do well and that lines up with your priorities, you might find them compelling, but for most listeners shopping in this price range, there are better balanced options that deliver the full sonic picture. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.